Move forward. Take action. Be decisive. Make a commitment. Take a deep breath and keep on marching. You keep on looking in this direction because, let me tell you something here. There's so much light at the end of the tunnel that you will be blinded by the brightness of what is on the other side of all of this. Your job is to rewire your brain with the power of your own mind. That's what neuroplasticity is all about. That's what the human experience is all about. To uncover and rediscover what we are. Human beings, feeling and thinking beings. And by doing so, creating our experience from a moment-to-moment basis. Expand your consciousness into a world where mindfulness meets neuroscience. My name is Fernanda Lind, and I am your host. Welcome to today's show, my friends. On this episode, we're going to dive into 3 principles that govern the human experience. And for some of you that are listening now, you might be familiar with the principles already. But for some of you, this might be the first time that you hear about them. So before we dive in, let me invite you to simply listen, be open, allow whatever you hear to open up for a bit of curiosity. So that's it. Okay, friends, let's dive in. I want to share how I see the principles. And this is simply how I experience it, where my understanding is around them right now. It keeps evolving and I keep deepening my understanding every day. But right now and right here, I am gonna do my absolute best to break it down and explain them hopefully in a way that resonates with you, that makes sense on a very practical level. I think it's very easy to speak to these principles from a high place, where it just becomes nonsense for someone who's not been immersed to them for a while. So sometimes you stumble upon something that has a profound impact on your life. And that's what happened for me when I stumbled upon the principles. Sometimes you stumbled upon truth. Yes, truth with a capital T. Truth that opens your eyes and reveals the big mysteries of life and awakens you to the fact that nothing is what it seems, that nothing ever was what it seemed. And that's what happened to me. And I know that is what many have experienced when they were exposed to this truth, this understanding that the 3 principles point towards. And this is kind of what the principles opens you up to. The truth of how this human experience actually works. And seeing truth is like getting a glimpse towards how this machinery works, that is creating this universe, that creates humanity, and how we experience this thing being human. So let me share a bit of the history and just a little bit of backstory to how these principles came to be defined as 3 principles. So many years ago, there was a man named Sydney Banks. He was, from my understanding, not a seeker and not spiritual anyway. This is what people who are close to him have shared. He was a welder. He was going about his life in a very ordinary way. And then one day, he had a deep experience. He saw something very profound, and it would forever change his life and the life of those who also shared this understanding with him. So what he saw was 3 principles that explain how we experience life. He named them thought, consciousness, and mind. So those are the 3 principles. So thought, consciousness, and mind. And these 3 principles are not ideas or beliefs, just to be very clear. it's not a religion. These are fundamental principles of how we as human beings experience our lives. So these principles gives us a factual understanding of the workings behind our psychology or human experience. And I'm going to be very honest here and share that I was very skeptical at first. I had been living for a long time in a very different understanding. I think for over 30 years. Obviously, I was not going to change my paradigm in an instant. Just like I would probably been a skeptic too years ago to the idea of gravity or an electromagnetic field. If I've lived 100 years ago, that would have been totally crazy. An invisible force field, like where? I can't see it. So understandably, I was kind of wary when I first stumbled upon Sydney Banks and his work and his teaching. I think everybody is. But at the same time, I heard truth to what he said, to what he speaks to. And something within me resonated, connected with that truth. Almost like a feeling of like I knew it. I knew, of course, it must be like this. So a glimpse of that was visible to me, which obviously got me very curious and made me start exploring this and challenging it as well. So for me, I knew that, if the principles, what they imply are true, then I should be able to see evidence everywhere. The same with gravity or with the electromagnetic field. And of course there was everywhere, all the time. Like there was no question around it. It's like noticing exactly that gravity, for example, is at play in the background at all times. Like when we start playing with it and being present to it, obviously we see that it's right in front of us. I saw it. I saw this truth staring me in the face. I saw that, the three principles are governing our psychological experience at all times. And I could notice these three principles at play every single time, in every single moment of my life, which kind of blew my mind. My whole world tilted. Slowly, my own understanding started to unfold from there, and it keeps expanding every day. Today, I see it very differently than what I did a few years ago. And I'm still pretty humbled every day and at how exquisitely designed this human experience is. It keeps surprising me, I guess. So with that, let's dive into talk about the three principles and how they explain this thing being human, this experience that we are having. So the three principles are simply explained as this. So first we have thought and the fact that we think. We have consciousness and the fact that we are aware. And we have mind and the fact that we are alive. I'm going to repeat that because I think this is the basis of the understanding. So thought and the fact that we think. And everyone can probably relate to that and nod their head and say, yeah, we think. Consciousness and the fact that we are aware. And yeah, we are conscious of an experience, that we're having an experience. Consciousness and experience go hand in hand. And then mind. Mind as in the fact that we are alive. And I'm going to explain and expand on these principles a little bit more. First of all, I just want to point out that even if the three principles can be explained in these three parts, the three principles are one. So this is very important to understand. They are working together as one. We cannot have one without the other. They all work together same pieces of this one energy, one field. It is important to understand this, so we're not getting caught up in just trying to explain our psychological experience just from one of these principles, because together they create this experience. But I'm going to explore one at a time and dive into them separately. I think that can be very helpful and very interesting and exciting. So first, we're going to start with the principle of thought and the fact that we think. Thought created every single experience that you've ever had. So let that sink in for a second here. Thought creates every single feeling and experience that we're having. It's that creative force that brings our experience to life. It's the voice in your head, that inner chatter, that one that talks constantly, that comments on everything that's going on and gives meaning to situations and events. It's the pictures and images in your mind. It's the dreams that come to life and the nightmares that lurk in the corners of our inner world. Thought is this creative force, and it shows up through us and is brought to life with our attention. So when we stay with a thought, it feels real. When we give a thought or an image or a picture, it feels real. It is brought to life. It feels deeply real. And it creates a feeling. And it colors our inner and outer world. It colors our experience. So thought creates our feelings. Thoughts are a creative force, creating an illusion, creating a virtual reality, in other words, on a moment-to-moment basis. New thought comes through you, is coloring your feelings, coloring your experience, and by doing so, creating this experience. If we take the same situation with another thought, which might lead to another feeling, it will create another experience. So that is how we go from moment to moment, living and experiencing this life. We are having thought is coming through and we are giving it attention, and it creates or colors our experience. And if you don't believe me right now, or you absolutely don't get what I'm saying here, first of all, it's totally cool. The first times it can just sound like nonsense. But the more we look towards this, the more we see that this is actually exactly what we're experiencing. But I want to invite you to just do a little experiment with this and start playing with this, so you are getting a sense for what the principle of thought is and how it operates. So when you feel happy, for example, or filled with joy, what thinking are you having? What thought created that? What image is creating that? How is that brought to life within you? Or when you get angry, what is the cause of that anger within you? So start noticing and paying attention to what we're feeling and thinking, that combination in any situation, and how that is coloring our experience. That's what I'm inviting you to do, to get very curious and notice that the power of thought is truly creating your experience. I think that the best example is to look at how nightmares work. For me, that was a good step towards deepening my understanding. When we think about how a nightmare works, so the creative power of thought is creating all kinds of images of thought in our awareness. And from there, we're having an emotional reaction. So when we're having a nightmare, we believe these vivid images. We are gripped with fear. They might really scare us. They look very real, right? We feel maybe anxiety or even panic. And we can wake up in the middle of the night feeling confused and caught up in this nightmare because it feels and looks very, very real. So our mind or our brains are playing tricking our experience. We are having an inner experience that feels emotionally very real. And obviously, none of it is real. It is just an illusion created from this, from thought. But still, we wake up terrified and scared, and it can follow us, tag along maybe for a full day sometimes, or even longer. We remember those nightmares. Oh, they rattle us. So our own thinking created that. Just to really see that. And the same thing happens in daytime. Here's where it gets really interesting when we start noticing that our inner experience is being created by thought that can, the same thing, rattle us. It is thought creating your experience. Right now, you might be like, no, this is just nonsense. Like, or you might just feel a little bit lost here in this conversation. Or that your mind feels this feels like a mind pretzel. This is totally normal. And I know, I experienced this too. But stay with it, okay? Because the more you look towards this, the more you're going to see. So thought is this fantastic illusion creating this human experience. It is an illusion. It is creating our reality from a moment-to-moment basis. So this is so important to understand, and it can be a little bit spooky and uncomfortable, but to see that we are living in this illusion created by thought. Let's explore another of the principles. Let's chat about consciousness, the principle of consciousness, and the fact that we are aware. I am going to dive right in here and tell you that you are not who you think you are. Yeah. We're diving kind of into the land of woo-woo or deep spirituality, or when it becomes uncomfortable. And I want to get straight to the point and just say it. We are not who we think we are. You are not who you think you are. The truth is that we are consciousness. You are formless energy. You are not bound by time or space, and science says so. We're not going to go into any kind of technical details around there. That's for another episode to geek out on that. But you are a being, a consciousness, or you are experience itself. And already here it becomes kind of weird and beyond comprehension. The topic of consciousness is something that has been studied and deeply discussed by scientists and philosophers and any kind of spiritual teacher, obviously. And still, we're obviously not even scratching the surface. But just to speak towards consciousness from Sydney Banks' standpoint, we're not really who we think we are. So the question is, well, who are we then? Well, you are the observer. We are the one who listens. You are the one who is feeling, who hears and have these senses, and who is experiencing being human. That is who we truly are. We are consciousness, conscious being. And the same being that was there when you were born, the same being that was there when you were 15, standing in front of a mirror, staring at your own eyes and wondering, who am I? But the same as you are today, looking maybe at your selfie and wondering, who am I? Well, that's the being we're talking about here. That's the part of you that is pure consciousness. You are experience itself, witnessing, a curious and powerful being, capable of stepping back, retreating, observing, detaching, listening, but also capable of stepping out and exploring and getting all caught up in this illusion that is life. And I want to read something that author Annika Harris wrote in her book Conscious. She writes, "Consciousness is experience itself, and it is therefore easy to miss the profound questions staring us in the face in each moment. Why would any collection of matter in the universe be conscious? We look right past the mystery, as if the existence of consciousness were obvious or an inevitable result of complex life. But when we look more closely, we find that it is one of the strangest aspects of reality. That is so amazing. I love how she goes straight to the point. Consciousness being one of the strangest aspects of reality, period. Profound, mind-boggling, spooky, weird, fascinating. Yeah. And I think here's where it gets interesting. We can have zero awareness of the fact that we think and that we are aware. I know I was for a long time. We can be totally oblivious to the fact that we are consciousness itself, having an experience. And we can live our lives believing that we are what we see in the mirror, that we are our thoughts, that we are what we see and what we experience, that is us, the identity, the self I'm diving into here a little bit. And here's what I've come to see, and this is why this can be very practical in a sense and very valuable to us. When we lack awareness that we are consciousness, that we are having an experience, that we are matter composed by a bunch of particles, when we lack the awareness of the fact that we are having an experience, that we're being aware of our existence in some capacity, that's when we suffer. So that is when we suffer tremendously with ourselves. That is when we get caught in our own experience and we can't transcend our limitations. That's when we can't handle life. That's when we get stuck at this sub-zero level of consciousness. We lack awareness and we struggle terribly. That's when we get angry, we get upset, even with the tiniest thing. We get angry with people for annoying us, for maybe letting us down, for disappointing us again. We feel hopeless. We feel like life is an uphill battle. So that is the lowest level of consciousness. It's just a nightmare. But what's great about this is that once we get to see that, oh, maybe I am not my thinking, maybe I am consciousness. And we start having awareness about the fact that I actually hear my thinking. I'm the one who hears it. Once we understand that life is created through our conscious awareness, that we can witness our experience from a deeper place, then life gets a bit simpler. I'm not saying easier. I wish, but definitely simpler. We get curious instead, and we have awareness that we are consciousness, we are experience itself. And as we develop this awareness, you also come to deepen your understanding of who you truly are, and you come to see something else, that your consciousness is bigger than you, that your little self, that maybe things are not what they seem, that there's a part of you that is having an experience, and that you are the observer, that you are observing your life unfolding. The truth is that if you test this for yourself, you will come to see this truth as well. And I encourage you actually to try it for yourself. So do a little experiment. Who are you? Are you the one who talks all day long in your head? Then who is the one listening? The one being conscious and witnessing this experience. If you just sit down for a second and wait, if you get quiet, can you sense that you are the observer? That you are the one witnessing? Can you sense that you are the observer of your thoughts and actions? Can you sense that you are not even in control of your thoughts or not even in control of your actions, but that they might have their own will and come and go as they please? Can you detach from thoughts? Can you take a step back and see if you are there within, observing, witnessing? You are experiencing. You are being consciousness. Yeah? We as human beings have the capacity to step back and contemplate what's going on in our inner world. We have that capacity. It's an innate capacity. And we have the ability to detach from our own thinking, to observe what we think, to be a witness to our experiencing. So it's pretty remarkable. It's a pretty astounding feature of the human design. So the three principles of thought, consciousness, and mind bring everything into creation, and these principles create the reality we live in. Consciousness makes us able to experience it all. Without consciousness, we would not be able to experience life as we live it. We wouldn't be able to feel and participate in this roller coaster that is called life, this illusion called life. Before we enter this world, I believe there should be a warning sign that says, "Welcome to the human experience. This ride feels very real, but make no mistake, it's just an illusion. Fasten your seatbelts, enjoy the ride." So consciousness lets us enjoy this ride, experience this ride, experiencing it in full color, with full senses. And it's absolutely fantastic and extraordinary and mind-blowing if you think about it. And this is who you really are, infinite consciousness, pure consciousness. All life is energy that has taken form and at one point became conscious of its experience. This is also very fascinating and spooky. All life is created from a formless energy into a form that is conscious of itself. And as Sydney Banks would put it, the fact that consciousness is infinite is good news. It means that we will never stop growing or expanding, that there is infinite amount of beauty and love to explore, as he would say. We are consciousness itself. Each and every one of us is this pure consciousness, and we are experience itself. Sydney Banks said, "Personal consciousness is a gift that we use from moment to moment to see and react to the world we live in." Yeah. Friends, let's do a recap here of the three principles. The three principles are the foundation of all psychological functioning, and they describe the human experience. Sydney Banks would put it as the three principles are the trinity of all psychological experience. And with these three principles, we weave our entire experience here on earth. So first we talked about the principle of thought and the fact that we think. The fact that we are not our thoughts. And then we covered the principle of consciousness and the fact that we are aware and that we are experience itself. Conscious about the fact that we think and we are aware that we are witnessing our experience, this human experience. Your emotions and feelings, your experience are a product of the principles. So just understand that we're always using the three principles to create our own reality. So we're going to dive into now the principle of mind and the fact that we are alive. The fact that we have, as Annaka Harris calls it, our lights on. So there is an energy field and intelligence behind life that is formless and impersonal. Sydney Banks called it universal mind or divine mind. You can call it intelligence. This intelligence runs within us all and is innate. It comes as a default setting in every human being. And here's where all knowledge lies as well. Every answer we're looking for is right there within us. I know, and here's when it breaches upon the spiritual. But stay with me here. Sydney Banks said, universal mind is the spiritual power that activates the human brain. Universal mind is the greatest mysteries on earth. So yeah, having our lights on. And yes, I think every philosopher, every scientist would agree on that the fact that we have our lights on, that we are powered up, is the greatest mystery. That we are consciousness, that we are experience, that lighting up our experience, that out of nothing, out of matter, something is brought to life. And that can experience itself. That something can experience itself. It is mind-blowing. And here's where this conversation gets definitely woo. It becomes spiritual. It is, it's really the mind pretzel here, at least for me personally. It can also get very technical and philosophical. We can breach over to quantum physics. But without going too deep into science and the theory behind this universal power, this intelligence, I want to bring another layer to today's conversation, and just to keep the focus on Sydney Banks and how he saw these principles and how he pointed towards the fact that this intelligence that operates within us, that is what drives us, and at the end of the day that makes us do the things we do, that it brings us answers. The answers that we are looking for are not in the world without, but in the world within. And Sydney Banks pointed towards this fact that every answer is available to you if you let your own personal thinking, your own personal thought quiet down. That when our minds slow down or thinking slows down and we let this intelligence come through, we have an insight. We see something very differently. We get an answer to whatever it is that we need to see or uncover. And that this intelligence, all this time, it's been guiding us and showing us the way. It's what has led you here today to where you are now. It is wisdom guiding every step. We're actually creating this experience for us, and we are just in for the ride. We're just a witness to it. And I think it gets very interesting when we listen to our own personal thinking instead, and our own thoughts become something we take very seriously. That's when we get into trouble and we suffer. It's when we believe our own personal, the little thinking, that we get depressed, we have panic attacks, when we are getting caught up in a nightmare, an illusion, and we believe that we are making choices, that we have a free will, and life is in our control, and then we might even fall into a bigger place of depression and despair and darkness. And I want to invite you into what Sydney Banks pointed towards, and that I'm experiencing myself more and more, is that this bigger intelligence is there beneath all that personal chatter, the thinking, the nonsense. And it is actually pointing us towards truth, that we are okay regardless of what we do. That regardless of the experience we're having, that we are safe, that we're okay. This bigger intelligence points us to the fact that we are resilient, that we have an innate well-being, that we have within us everything that we need to be okay, that we are actually full of health, mental health. This universal mind is there to show us what steps to take in the moment, and it drives us to behave in certain ways. And if we step out of the way with our small personal thinking, when we stop trying to control it or to argue with it, when we stop trying to figure it all out, and instead leave it to the bigger intelligence to lead the way, as it is doing anyway, we surrender. And it is about surrendering deeply to the fact that I don't have all the answers, but if I step out of my own way, the answer will come to me, and that it's already there waiting for me. And I know it can sound so woo-woo here, but it is very true, and science is pointing towards that. It's this whole conversation also around having free will or not, or that we're just actually here for the right witnessing and experience. But I want to invite you into just asking yourself the question, where do the answers come from? So contemplate this for a moment. Just sit with that. Any good idea that you've had came out of the blue, didn't it? Let me repeat that. Any good idea that you have had came out of the blue. And where is that blue? Every creative idea that you've ever had just kind of came to you, was downloaded into you. But out of where? That's the mystery. I know Einstein spoke towards this as well, that him having ideas or insights coming to him out of who knows where. And we know that it came to us out of a formless, out of this nowhere. This nowhere is something formless. At least that's how we understand it. And out of this field of energy that is running the universe. Like it or not, believe it or not, we cannot see it. This out of the blue. And intellectually trying to understand this is kind of pointless. It means that we have understood it from the outside. We can maybe agree on certain things, and that we understand that it came from out of formless and into form. But insightful understanding of how this experience works is when you have experienced this bigger intelligence, this bigger universal intelligence from within. Experiencing this mind, this universal mind in action means you've experienced where true knowledge exists. And Sydney Banks referred to wisdom as what lies deep within our psyche, waiting to be uncovered. And he pointed to the truth that everyone has mental health, everyone has wisdom within their own being, but that is just contaminated by our own personal thinking. Without our personal thinking, something else deeper shines through. This invisible energy, this invisible spiritual energy that is creating our personal reality and powering that up, which implies that we are all living in our own parallel realities. Each and every one of us are living in a separate reality. We're just witnessing our own experience from within. So my human experience is not the same as your human experience. We're always experiencing and witnessing our own thinking. This is so cool and important to understand, because this lays the foundation for everything in life. When we truly come to see this, I believe it's the point when we have awakened. It's the point of enlightenment, when we've seen something at that level, we understand this. We wake up from this illusion that is created by thought. We wake up from the illusion of even having free will. And yes, that is a topic for another episode, but it's so important to see that once we are aware of this, aware that there is this energy running the show, we have awakened. And that's where life begins. And that's when this experience really begins. So my friends, I'm going to end this episode right here. I think I've did my best trying to explain the 3 principles. And obviously we're just scratching the surface. This can be a deep dive that can take us far and wide. And hopefully that is what this podcast is going to invite you to do, to explore consciousness, to explore how your brain is wired, how to navigate this thing called life with more peace and flow and excitement. So for everyone, wherever you are, have a beautiful day or evening, and I will be seeing you in the next episode. You have been listening to the Wired to Win podcast with me, Fernanda Lind. For more episodes, show notes, links, and ways to subscribe to the show, go to fernandalin.com/podcast. Please subscribe and leave a rating and review on Apple Podcasts or wherever you go to get your podcasts to help others find the show.